Ever since we exchanged vows, my husband, a classic mama's boy, hadn't he contributed to a single household chore. His utter dependence became glaringly clear when I informed him of an upcoming business trip. Panic clouded his features as he exclaimed, "Who will take care of me while you're gone?" Following a heated argument, I proceeded with my week-long journey. Upon my return, I found a note next to the filled-out divorce papers, which read, "Since you abandoned the housework, I'm returning to my parents. Consider the divorce papers and think it over." His audacity to threaten divorce was infuriating. However, as I calmed down, I began to see this as possibly the right direction. Maybe a divorce wasn't such a bad idea after all. Resolute, I submitted the papers the next day. The following morning, my astonished husband stormed in, demanding, "Where are the divorce papers?" When I told him they were filed, he broke down, utterly baffled and crying uncontrollably. "My name is Sophie. I'm 32 years old and had been married for just over a year. After college, I diligently climbed the ranks at a prominent company. Approaching 32 without a romantic partner, and pressured by my parents to settle down, I reluctantly joined a dating agency. That's where I met David, a soft-spoken man a few years younger than me who worked at a mid-sized firm. We connected over several dates, and he was nothing but respectful and understanding during our courtship, which made me think he was the one. When he proposed, I was overjoyed, thinking we'd spend our lives together. But our marriage revealed challenges I hadn't anticipated. When I joyfully accepted David's proposal, we became officially engaged. Visiting my parents, they impressed upon us that marriage is a lifelong commitment. "Sophie, always be there for David," they advised, and I agreed while David listened attentively. Our next stop was David's parents' house. His father, Jack, welcomed me with open arms, saying, "I've heard so much about you from my boy. It's great to finally meet you." His mother, Ella, however, was more reserved. With a scrutinizing look, she asked David, "Is this the one?" I was slightly taken aback by his use of mommy, as well as Ella's forthrightness. Jack quickly intervened. "Enough, Ella." He apologized for her bluntness and reassured me, "We're very happy about your marriage. But, just so you know, David has had it pretty easy here. He might be a bit of a challenge." I responded with assurance. "I adore David's gentle side, and I know we'll support each other." Jack then turned to David, urging him, "Starting a family is a big deal, son. Step up and keep her happy." David, looking earnest, nodded in agreement. Our meeting concluded, and not long after, David and I celebrated our union with a low-key wedding. To our delight, my parents gifted us a condo, where we embarked on our marital journey. However, it soon became evident that David was not accustomed to household responsibilities. One morning, while I was already busy with laundry and preparing breakfast, David's alarm rang at 8 o'clock. But he continued to sleep soundly. No matter how much I tried to wake him, he wouldn't stir. Finally, after pulling off his covers and giving him a shake, he slowly opened his eyes. He groggily blinked. "Whoa, it's 8:10 already, why didn't you wake me up?" he complained. I reminded him, "I did try, and your alarm was blaring, too. Now, please eat your breakfast." As he rubbed his eyes and shuffled to the dining table, he immediately started complaining about the eggs. "Hey, Sophie, this egg is too runny. I can't eat this unless it's well done. Make it over," he demanded. Caught while hanging laundry, I tried to hold back my irritation and snapped, "Then don't eat it." "Why would you say that?" he whined. "And this coffee? It's scorching hot. Mommy always got the eggs and coffee just right. All right, all right. I sighed, quickly redoing the eggs and letting the coffee cool. He ate hurriedly but left his plate on the table, rushing towards the restroom. Wait up. You know you should clean up after yourself. Geez, I'm short on time. He called back, dismissing his responsibility even though his breakfast delay was his fault. Annoyed, I paused my makeup routine to clean up the dishes. While picking out my outfit, he called out again. Sophie! Over here! Help with my tie! There he stood, tie hanging limply around his neck, looking utterly helpless. Seriously, you can't even tie your tie? What did you do before we got married? Mommy always did it, he replied sheepishly. With a deep exhale, I knotted his tie, and somehow, we both managed to leave the house. This had become our routine. He never helped with any housework, and it felt like I was juggling everything and babysitting him, too. Every time an issue arose, it was always, Mommy did it this way, or with Mommy, it went like that, always referencing his mother, Ella. This routine dragged on for a year, and as the pressures mounted, thoughts of divorce began to creep into my mind. My father's insistence that marriage is forever echoed in my mind, tempering my frustrations. However, an unexpected hiccup at work led to my being assigned a week-long business trip, starting the next day. When I broke the news to my husband that evening, he paused his video game, clearly surprised. Hold up! A business trip for a whole week? It's out of my hands. Work's calling, I explained. No way. Who's going to cover for you here for a week? He asked, irritation seeping into his tone. You'll have to step up. It's about time you got a grip on the household duties, I responded. At that, he set down his controller and locked eyes with me. Isn't the wife supposed to care for her husband and the house? Are you just bailing on that? His question dripped with outdated expectations. Seriously, that's such old school thinking. We both have jobs, we should be a team. I countered. That's not how I see it. Mommy was always on top of things at home, he retorted. I couldn't help but point out, but she was a stay-at-home mom. And honestly, it's kind of odd to hear an adult man constantly talking about Mommy. He bristled at this. What's your deal, taking shots at me and my Mommy? I'm not. But let's be real, you're a mama's boy. This is how you see me. You think you can talk to me like that? That's why I was iffy about marrying someone older. Should have sided with Mommy and chosen a younger, perkier girl. He shot back. His words struck a nerve, and our conversation spiraled into a major blowout. Even joking, you shouldn't say stuff like that. We married. I said, trying to anchor the conversation to the commitment we had made to each other. The tension between us was palpable, revealing the deep rifts that had formed in our relationship. You can't possibly want a divorce, can you? You wouldn't want to be labeled divorced. And think about what your dad said about sticking together. But then he sharply added, well, I just did. If you go on this business trip and leave me here alone, I'm seriously considering a divorce. With those words, he stormed off to our bedroom, leaving me stunned. Despite the shock, the idea of divorce lingered in my mind, something I had previously struggled with as I didn't want to disappoint my parents. Yet now, it seemed like a viable option to contemplate seriously. With these heavy thoughts, I went to bed. Bright and early the next day, I was up, preparing for my trip. The fallout from our argument was still fresh and weighing on me, but I had work commitments to attend to. I nudged David, who was still nestled under the covers. I'm heading out. You better wake up, or you'll be late for work. His response was a sleepy, unintelligible mumble. Rolling my eyes, I left. A few hours later, a text from him popped up on my phone. You barely tried to wake me. Now I'm running late. Did you really go on that trip? I quickly texted back. I did wake you up. And yes, I'm on my trip. I'll be back in a week. He read my message but didn't reply. Mid-trip, I decided to call my parents to update them about David's behavior and share my growing inclination towards divorce. I braced myself for a lecture, unsure of how they would react to the possibility of our marriage ending. The call was going to be a difficult one, but it was necessary to seek their advice and perhaps their understanding of my situation. The response from my parents took me by surprise. We had no idea he behaved like this. Take your time to think, but don't force yourself to stay in a situation that isn't right. Always remember, we are in your corner, no matter what you decide. Their words of unconditional support brought tears to my eyes. Upon returning from my business trip, I knew a serious conversation with David was inevitable. If he didn't show signs of change, I was ready to consider divorce more seriously. My mind was abuzz with thoughts as I walked into our house late in the evening, only to find David wasn't home yet. As I looked around, a set of signed divorce papers and a note on the table caught my attention. The note read, "Since you ditched the housework, I'm heading back to my folks. Check out the divorce papers and think things over." Reading this, my initial reaction was rage. How dare he threaten me with divorce? But as my anger subsided, I began to see the situation differently. Maybe this was an indication that ending things might not be such a bad idea after all. With that realization, I decided to file the papers. When the divorce was finalized, I felt as if a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. That evening, I went to bed and slept more soundly than I had in a long time. The next morning, as I enjoyed a peaceful cup of coffee, the door swung open, and in walked David, clearly upset. "Why didn't you come to my parents' place to apologize? What's gotten into you?" he demanded, his temper flaring. Then, noticing the empty spot where the divorce papers had been, his expression shifted from anger to shock. "Hold on, where are the divorce papers?" "Oh, I filed them," I calmly responded. "You did what?" He looked as if he had been slapped. "You went through with it. Thanks for signing them, it made everything smoother," I said. "You can't be serious. Did you go all the way? Have you lost your mind?" he exclaimed, unable to hide his astonishment at my decisiveness. Seeing how composed I remained, he lost his cool completely. "That's it. I'm calling my parents." "Sure, knock yourself out," I replied, undisturbed by his threat, knowing I had made the right decision for myself. An hour after the confrontation with David, his parents, Ella and Jack, arrived at our apartment. Ella immediately spotted me and dramatically exclaimed, "You! How could you just divorce David like that? What's your deal? If he had the divorce papers all filled out and ready to go, doesn't that suggest he wanted out? Is that a problem?" I responded coolly. "How can you be so bold when you're just his wife?" she countered. But before the situation could escalate further, Jack intervened with a firm, "Enough." The room fell silent. Jack turned to me. "Sophie, can you walk us through what happened?" I agreed and began detailing the ongoing issues, our argument before my trip, and the divorce papers David had left for me. I was at my wit's end. It seemed like he wanted a divorce, so I went with it, I explained, maintaining eye contact with Jack. After a moment of consideration, Jack was about to speak when David interjected, "Mommy! Dad! Come on! Can't you see she's out of line? Tell her off." Ella quickly sided with David. "Oh, David, my poor baby. She's so hasty. You should reverse the divorce right now." "There's no reversing it. Our divorce is final. We're strangers now," I stated firmly. Ella's face turned red, and she opened her mouth to respond, but once again, Jack cut her off. "Zip it, Ella." He then apologized to me for David's behavior. Turning to David, whose eyes were bulging with surprise, Jack continued, "You bonehead. I knew you had issues, but this is next level, using divorce papers as a threat. Unbelievable." "You had it coming," Ella tried to interject, but Jack didn't let up. "It's partly on you, Ella. You spoiled him. Watch out. If you keep this up, I might divorce you, too." The tension in the room was palpable as Jack confronted the reality of the situation, leaving David and Ella at a loss for words. After the intense discussion, Ella was visibly shaken, her thoughts lingering on the unexpected threat of divorce from Jack. She murmured to herself, visibly troubled. As Jack turned his attention back to me, his expression was marked by sincere regret. "Sophie, I deeply regret the trouble our clueless son has caused you. It's clear he has a lot to learn. Please move on and find happiness in your life," Jack implored with genuine concern. Thanking Jack for his understanding, I watched as he left, taking a dejected David with him. It wasn't long before news spread throughout our circle. Jack had decided to cut financial and emotional ties with his son, a drastic step meant to push David towards self-sufficiency. David's life took a downward spiral shortly thereafter. He moved into a modest, somewhat neglected apartment, his first time living truly by himself. The transition was far from smooth. His new home quickly descended into chaos, a visible representation of his disorganized personal life. With no one to depend on and habitual tardiness, David soon found himself unemployed, his inability to adhere to a schedule finally catching up with him. Simultaneously, the dynamics within his family deteriorated further. Ella, who had always been intricately involved in David's personal affairs, overstepped boundaries one too many times, which led to a serious fallout with Jack. Ultimately, this resulted in their separation. Ella ended up moving in with David, each of them struggling to find stable footing. They scraped by with low-end jobs, their lives marked by a series of unfortunate events and poor decisions, with no clear path to improvement visible. On the other hand, my own life took a markedly different turn. Freed from the daily stresses and emotional drain of my relationship with David, I found myself alone in our condo, which now felt surprisingly spacious and full of potential. With renewed energy and focus, I dedicated myself to my career. The absence of David's negative influence allowed me to excel at work, and my professional life flourished as a result. Feeling liberated and optimistic, I embraced my newfound independence. My living space not only felt more open but became a true sanctuary where I could relax and plan for the future. The improvement in my work life was palpable, and I approached each day with a sense of excitement and anticipation for what lay ahead. The contrast between my thriving existence and the downward trajectory of David and Ella's situation was stark. While they were no longer a part of my life, the lessons learned from our time together resonated deeply, reinforcing my commitment to personal growth and happiness.